go. See if it all works out. You know what's really funny to me? I don't see any people. I see names. I don't see people. So you all, maybe you're all on a hot mess express too today. Or maybe you'll be so brave and let me see your beautiful faces. But because I'm recording it, let's go ahead and do the intro. This is the Liveloved Plexus team. I am the Liveloved, I guess, originator, Rachel Valentine, right here coming in hot from Northwest Iowa. And this is what we do fairly regularly, is we meet up on Monday nights to share a little bit about what's going on in our Plexus world, to encourage each other, to uplift each other, to be in the know. Hey Laura, it's good to see your face. There's Joy's face, love it. Maybe Corey will let us see her loveliness, who knows. But I thought I would get us started today just by reviewing some Plexus business. And then we'll really do more of a deeper dive into our Made for This study by none other than the Miss Jennie Allen. Love it. I will be talking from day 6 and day 7 from the book. And I just could not love it more. So without further ado, and before you hear my boys screaming in the background, because thus it is approaching bedtime, a few things, a few Plexus business reminders. First of all, one promotion is ending. So we are sad that our last month enrollees, well, we are not sad that each of them got 3 free enrollment codes, right? But they expire at midnight tonight. But Plexus continues to bless us very, very richly, because then there's more stuff that's going on. So first off, all $1.99 welcome packs continue to be $10 off through the end of this month. So that is fantastic. Those welcome packs in and of themselves really pack a bargain. I know that sometimes that $1.99 seems like, that's a lot to ask, but it's really not when you look at the value of all that is included. Some of those welcome packs are like 40 to 50% off, believe it or not, off of retail. So it continues to be a very sweet deal for many. Also, this week, Plexus let us know that they are doing double bonus earnings on all welcome packs for this month. So that actually began, I don't know what date. I don't remember, but it started this week. So you can look at your Plexus Worldwide emails. But they are, in fact, if you did sign someone up before the start date, they will retro one of those. So how this works is double bonus earnings come into play if you sign up 2 ambassadors with welcome packs, either the $99 or the $99 or the $199. You sign 2 of them, you earn a double bonus. So that would mean like each of those would be a typical $25 bonus, so you would get a $50 bonus, right? Am I thinking that correctly? Nod your head if I'm correct. I don't know. So yes. So you could knock yourself out and, you know, really go to town. Or if you have any new people who join in April or have joined in April, so let's say you utilize this, you sign a couple of people, those people are going to get 3 free enrollment codes. So this just continues to roll over so that we can help them see the benefit. And it is a pretty major benefit, which we will talk about today. And again, anyone who goes silver in April will also get the 3 free enrollment codes. So they're just rolling over what they started in the month of March, which March was a phenomenal month for us. In the last little while, I feel like in this transition, so I'm transitioning, oh, hello dogs. I'm transitioning away from business. That's the technical Plexus updates on the business front. But I want to make sure that all of you, I don't know how many of you did sign up for the Dough app, whether you signed up for a full year or if you're doing it month to month, or if you're not doing it at all, that's completely okay. But my reminder to everyone would be what a wonderful opportunity to keep sharing, and doggone it anyway if consistency isn't the main driver for forward movement, which there's nothing sexy about consistency. It's just daily showing up and doing the darn thing. That is what moves you forward. And I get it. There are days where you're like, I just don't want to. This is just, I'm drained. And I would just say, show up and do something in the face of that overwhelm. Because you know what? I'm just really believing that the spirit of overwhelm robs us from everything that God has put in our journey for us to do, whether it's Plexus or not. That spirit of overwhelm, I'm too tired, I just can't, like, no, just do one thing propelling you into forward motion versus stuckness. So where we're going to go today as we transition into the Made for This study is, I don't know about you guys, but I've just been learning so much. I did the Broken Brain 2 series. I don't know if any of you are doing that. I just thought it was really excellent. I spoke about it a little bit last week, and it is still just ruminating with me about so many of the things that were taught in that free 8-day docuseries by Dr. Mark Hyman and a bunch of his experts. Just phenomenal. And every single bit of it wrapped around to the importance of what we have, like the importance of acknowledging that there is something bigger than what most people understand about wholeness. And this is about wholeness. Mind, body, spirit, wholeness. And Dr. Hyman and his friends aren't inherently faith-based, but I think what they're tapping into with their research is something that is so, you guys, so much of this is intuitive, and yet most of our culture doesn't do nearly any of it. It's the belief that food is in fact medicinal. It is fuel. It is delicious and is meant for enjoyment, but isn't something for us to have like a party in our mouth with every single meal that we have. There's a bigger function for our food with our bodies, including our minds. There is an integrative connection between three special parts of our body. They spent careful time focusing on the importance of the gut, which was really big in the Broken Brain 1, but now they wrapped it around with the role of the heart and the mind, the brain, and how they are interconnected, which the role of the heart, in fact, as we know, Laura, well, both of you, Joy and Laura, you can nod if you've heard of the broken heart syndrome, right? Where literally the heart, yes. And so we're just finding how connected this organ, and I'm pointing to this organ, is within this entire system. And isn't that God's way in his design when he talks about the body, right? And of course, we take that metaphorically to be thinking about the body as a part of his church and the people that he's created. But but I think really also he's meaning the body. Like every bit of it works together in his design. There was one part where it was talking about the heart, and it was talking about how this works with the vagus nerve, which the vagus nerve, there's a whole line of therapy in my world called polyvagal therapy that really works to understand the role of the vagus nerve and how it connects all three parts of that body, the lower intestine, the lungs, the heart, and then lands in the limbic system of the brain, which is where our response to threat, to our response to fear, fight, flight, or freeze resides. It's our stress response in our brain. And so he was talking about how our heart responds to the vagus nerve when it's stressed, is it starts to get out of rhythm. It beats differently, which then again sends messages up to the brain and down below to the intestine. And the dance is out of rhythm, is out of sync. They would call this out of coherence, right? And so a lot of it was talking about like the role of meditation, the role of connection, of community with the heart. And I love the fact that research is looking at things like, again, for wholeness, it's looking at the role of community. It's looking at the role of prayer and meditation. It's looking at the role of sleep and Sabbath, although they wouldn't call it Sabbath, rest. It's looking at the role of play and enjoyment of your life. It's looking at the role of stress, of course. And it's looking at food. It's just, again, intuitive, grassroots things. And he spends some time actually talking about what certain supplements do for the brain. And I loved that when the specialist was talking about what specific supplements she would point out for the use of the brain, she actually points out alpha-lipoic acid. She reflects turmeric or curcumin, which is a part of turmeric. She talks about the role of omega-3 fatty acids. She talks about the role of magnesium. She talks about the role of probiotics. And as she went down the list, I was like, like, yes. Oh, yes. And methylated folate. And so I just, it's a good watch. But I want you to latch on to this idea today that in taking care, our business that we do with Plexus is about bringing care and restoration to the body, right? From the inside out, which is why we can have everything from Lyme's disease to insulin resistance to you name it, right? Because we're looking at the core restoration, the elements of hormones, blood sugar, inflammation, and gut health, and how they're pivotal. But I would say that if we're focusing on the body, there is no way that we are not also focusing into something that is a lot more precious. We're tapping into this bigger idea of restoration. I was listening to a podcast the other day that had Susie Larson on it, and Susie Larson said something, and I didn't write it down, and I should have, but she said something akin to what we carry in our souls, we carry in our cells. So the pain that we carry in our souls, the unhealed hurt and baggage and hard that we all have, like we don't have to have a big T trauma. We all have instances that we have stored within us that has become twisted and has become a way of disconnecting. And I'll explain that in just a minute a little bit further. But she would say all of that also resides in our cells as sickness. right, and decay and inflammation, and creates a whole host of physical issues. I found this really interesting. I'm reading this book by Dr. Dan Allender called Healing the Wounded Heart. And he said that what we fight, even though we may not understand it, is we fight the presence of evil that twists our intention to create safety and security as a little child, and twists it. And evil doesn't want to primarily kill us. Instead, it wants us to spend our lives in worry or regret. And ultimately despair. And he says there are two primary consequences of despair. And this is what I think, see if you can't make these connections with the body. The two primary consequences of despair are dissociation and indulgence. And many will spend their lifetime seeking one or both. Dissociation, disconnection, numbing, separation, and indulgence, the things that bring short-term happiness but not long-term joy. So I'm going to go into Made for This, chapter or day 6, which Jennie Allen entitles Restless. And she starts out with the verse in Acts 2:17, and I'm just going to read it and just see if you can wrap your head around it. I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. And she's setting something up for us. So when we left off, she had laid this premise about, and this invitation for each of us to say this prayer, this ongoing daily prayer to God that sounds like, I will do anything, like surrender. I will do anything you ask. I will go anywhere you ask. I will lay anything at your feet, and left us feeling like that's really dangerous, depending on your view of God. But here she takes it up and she says, so the most consistent question I've been asked by people who pray anything is some version of, I'm in. I'm all surrendered to God. But now what? I don't know what he wants me to do. What does he want me to do? And there's this sense of unease, of being on the precipice of something new that I want us to dive into. It's like a restlessness that we're not alone. So she says, why do we feel this way? And she's like, I think we feel this way, this uncertainty of what is he calling me to? Because we're aching for something magical, something great, something noble, something so big, some purpose, but all squeezed into the holes of our ordinary lives. To know which direction to go in. But here's the deal. Here's what we bring to the table. Most of us, if not all of us. We are numb. There's that dissociation. We are bored. We are bored. And yet, every once in a while, our heart races just a little. Not like when you were kids and we heard the words Disney World. Not even as intensely as when we heard the ice cream truck. But every once in a while, it quickens. Why such a restlessness for purpose? Why? Why do we have that? Because we know instinctively that it is very possible to waste our lives. We know it's possible to waste our lives. And these words haunt me and point me to one of the greatest fears of mankind. We aren't sure we really matter. We live with lots of things and lots of people. But do we live for something? We all desperately want to live for something greater than ourselves and our small pleasures. We die a little inside when we think we aren't, and we give up when we think we can't. But that purpose feels slippery sometimes. We glance over at people functioning in their giftedness, and God is using them in big ways, and we want it. We want it so badly, but it can feel so far away. There's a beautiful verse in the Bible hidden away in the book of Acts describing the end of David's life. Let's give it a listen. It says very simply, when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. So King David was a man after God's heart who lived a passionate mess of a life. But he sought after God and God's will, and God used him to change the history of the world. This verse has two truths that makes me tremble. Truth number one, God has a unique purpose for each of us in this generation. And the harder truth, truth number two, we have the choice to live that purpose or not. I want to serve the purpose of God in my generation before I fall asleep, before I die. I'm calling you to the same. If we as a generation serve the purposes of God on this earth, we could see our unwasted lives move together and change all of eternity. I want to attempt something in this journey together, to dream. First, let's assume that if we're breathing, which is the four of us and whomever watches this later, we have a specific purpose for being here on this earth. Every one of us with breath in our lungs still has something left to do. And I want to dream of what those purposes might be. So she talks about God created man in his image for a purpose. And the beginning of Genesis gives us kind of a foreshadowing of what that purpose is. There's only two jobs given to humankind. One is to fill the earth with image bearers, right? To procreate. Two is to make the world better. To take chaos and give it order. I would say a lot of what we do with Plexus, whether or not we know it or lift that up or not, is we make the world better. In our own way, we take chaos and we bring it under order. Now, when we're born, we're given certain resources. We're to take whatever we're given and use it to reflect God and to serve people during this very short time on earth. So she postures and she gives this series of what ifs. She says, what if? So just listen for a minute, okay? What if the things you love to do, like really loved to do, like if I give you the task to sit with a pen and paper and write down all the things that like lights you up inside. Joy, I know you, photography and being in nature, right? I have a little bit of Laura's spirit. She's a little bit of an adventurer at heart. I've seen some of her crazy adventure roller coasting love, right? Corey, I've seen some of you at that racetrack supporting the people that you love, right? I've also seen some passionate heat come out of you when you're torqued off, which is, I think, a whole nother side. That's the opposite side of the coin, which we have to pay attention to. What if the things you love, and I would say this too, what if the things that you're most hot under the collar about, you're most passionate about, aligned with the plans God has laid out for you from before the foundations of the earth? What if they're meant to point you to something, to tell you something? What if the seemingly random relationships and activities in your life suddenly had focus and felt intentional, hey Billy, and meaningful? What if the things that caused you the most hurt in your life, if you sat down with paper and you mapped out from as early as you could remember the things, even the painful things? What if they became the birthplaces of your deepest passions? What if you could get past your fears and insecurities and spend the rest of your life running your guts out after his purposes for you? I still feel it sometimes a whisper of more, not more because what I'm doing isn't important, but because I so rarely believe that it is. I'm going to flip on. There's some, she has a place to respond and read and reflect, and I'm just going to go forward because she laid out in day 6 for us to begin to dream again. And she gives us permission further in day 7 to dream. She quotes 2 Peter 1:3, his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life. And she lays out the word dream. Listen, the word dream we used to contain some poetic magic when we were children. Dreaming possessed our minds. We dreamed that eggplants were really plants that make eggs. And being a policeman was the perfect profession because they shoot real guns. And fairies were interested in teeth and built castles with them somewhere, which I think is kind of gross. But whatever, she writes that. So, and we couldn't wait to fall in love and close our eyes and kiss a boy for the first time at our wedding, which would have periwinkle blue cupcakes and dresses and flowers. God is a dreamer too, and he built us to dream. What is a dream? A dream is a visionary creation of the imagination, strongly desired goal or purpose, or something that fully satisfies a wish. And she talks about when she was a child, she dreamed about changing the world purely and perfectly using my gifts, and it all felt possible when she was a child. It all felt possible. But most of us remember what it was like to live with whimsy, and nothing on earth felt out of our reach. And if we could think of it, it was possible. No big deal. Now, we all used to be that way, but we all have lost our whimsy. Our dreams have died, and in our pursuit of maturity, we've lost ourselves and even lost more of God. Sometimes I feel guilty for dreaming. Is this selfish? Shouldn't we just focus completely on God and not get all narcissistic, thinking there are special things we should all be doing, and just focus on God? And she says it's true. We have become a generation obsessed with understanding ourselves and navel gazing, as if that holds the answer for our restless, discontent souls. This is important. I underlined it and starred it. We've come to treat God as if he exists for us rather than us existing for him. As if he's supposed to fit our plans rather than our only plan being to know him and to follow him. God is big, but he moves into the small. God cares about eternity, yet he cares about every second of every human's life. That's who we serve. That's who we serve. There's this tension that says, how do I stay humble and yet be a dream chaser? How do I have goals and still surrender everything at God's feet? It says we often desperately chase knowledge of God's will for me at the sacrifice of God's will. We will not do that here. As we look into what our dreams might be, what our call might be, let's embrace the tension of seeking God's will for us individually within God's revealed will for this earth, for eternity, and for his people. So it's us in service of everyone. It's not about us for the service of us. It's about us pursuing dreams that God put in us to glorify him and bring his kingdom here. I read this book. It was so big. It was like so much harder. I think I've talked about it before, but I was in a small group, and there was such a smarty pants professor from Northwestern. He's like a religion professor, and he was all sick of us doing these kind of Bible studies, and he wanted us to do hardcore theological study. And of course, I'm going off script completely, and I can't even remember the name of the book or the theologian, to be honest. It was 2 summers ago. But I can remember, even though this book was like pain, like I cannot tell you, I felt like I can only read a paragraph at a time, and then my brain is going to explode. Like I can't understand what he's saying. It's so hard. But it was so good and so rich, because what he did say was he was talking about the kingdom of God. And he was talking about how there's a different theology that says that very often, if you look at the old hymns and even so many traditions of faith, we think about the kingdom of heaven as something that we arrive upon when we die, right? So live a good life, love Jesus here, kind of just be a good person, and then when you die, you cash in your ticket and you get to punch into heaven, and that's fabulous. But he's like, no. You see, the kingdom of God is alive and active today, right here on earth, right now. And that God has called and equipped each of us who love his son as to be the co-joiners with God in changing this earth. We are agents. We have active agency in bringing the kingdom of God here on earth. And how we do that is how we care for the earth. So one of it was about ecology, right? A part of it was about how we love each other, how we serve one another. Because the outflow of loving Jesus with a pure and a whole heart is where James says at some point it flows into acts, right? It calls us to do something, not because it earns us a way into heaven, but because our love is compelling. And the Holy Spirit says you got to do something. You can't just hoard this in yourself. You've got to share it. And I think a little bit like for some of us who, if I had to do a show of hands, I think I would at least hold my hands of how many of you were like actively in pursuit of Plexus when it came into your life? Like you thought to yourself, I'm looking for that Plexus thing. I sure wish somebody would reach out to me about Plexus because I just can't wait. I'm going to do that Plexus thing. I think that most of us, we weren't looking for it. In fact, some of us were like, leave me the freak alone about it. We didn't want it. right? And yet it was given to us. And for those of us whose health was in the toilet, pre-Plexus, and for whatever reason, we were compelled to say yes. And it did a work in our body that changed us, which made us now these crazy people that post, even though most of us said, I will never, don't ask me. That will never be my story. That's gross. Here we are. Why? Because it did something in our lives, right? It changed us. And now we can't imagine not sharing that when we hear people with broken bodies and, dare I say, broken brains. Because we know that to not share would be hurtful. Like, we're not responsible for their yes, but we are responsible for our fear that keeps us from sharing. And I think that it's so interesting. The braver I get with sharing Plexus, it makes me bold, and it makes me so much braver in sharing about things that are ultimately even more important than Plexus. It helps me be a better person, a better witness. I think it's funny that we're called ambassadors for Plexus, because truly the word ambassador was used before Plexus. It was an ambassador for Christ. We are the aroma of him. And that's what we get to do. So she inspires us to start dreaming again, to actually spend some time, which we won't do tonight on this call, but I'm going to challenge you over the next week. Literally, I know you live busy, busy lives, but I would like if you could spend an hour, and I know that seems like a long time, but if you could find an hour to just get quiet. I mean, this is, after all, his week, his holy week. So get some time to get quiet with him and ask him, what are the things that bring the greatest joy in my life, that light me up inside? What are the things that tear me apart inside, that literally stoke anger and passion within me? What are the broken places of my story of pain that maybe, just maybe, you actually want to use to bring redemption and healing, not just for myself, but in the lives of others around me? Maybe ask him to open your heart and your mind and your spirit to begin to dream. Where might those things take you? What might he be stirring within you about a bigger calling, a bigger purpose, that's not so much about wealth, but is about transformation, about how might you be of great service and reflection of him in this very broken, hurting world. My thought is if we bring those questions to his feet, he's going to answer them because that's his way. Now, part of that might mean he might bring you into places that are uncomfortable. He might reveal things to you that are more hurt than happy. That's okay. That's okay. Because maybe you need to look at those things. That is day 7, day 6 and day 7, and I haven't even done day 8 yet, so we're definitely going to stop there. I'm going to pray us out and then we'll stop for tonight. This week, Jesus, let us find time to walk with you. Maybe when we have time to stop and get quiet, maybe we'll see you calling us out to walk on water. Maybe we'll be compelled to hide in the belly of a boat because the world is spinning around us and it's hard. Whatever it is, wherever we are called to join you, let us have the peace that you are already there and that you are sweet and that you are a friend and a savior and a lover of the parts of us that seem unlovable, unsavable, and so very unworthy. This week of all weeks, it's about you and your story of love for us. Lord, I pray that you would bring people into awareness around us that we are called to love each day. Maybe they're hard. Maybe they're the ones that are hard to love or that are different, or like Bob Goff says, they're really, really strange. The ones that aren't easy for us, God. Maybe they are us ourselves. Maybe it's ourselves that we have a hard time loving. God, I pray that you would help bring us to a place of compassion and self-love, that we could see just a glimpse of what you see in us, not for pride or narcissism, but because we are your daughter. I pray that you give us a spirit of boldness. I pray that you give us a spirit of courage that helps us each day to take one little step outside of our comfort zone, because when we do, that's where we fall into your arms. Because when life is comfortable, it's all about us and our capabilities. God, I pray that you bring us to places in our dreams that are so beyond what we feel capable, because then we know it's right. We thank you that you chose us. It's so special to know that we are chosen. It's the most inherent need for every single person to know that implicitly somebody sees them and purposely chooses them. Not excludes, but chooses, on purpose, wraps their arms around them and say, you are mine. And that's what you say to each of us. And if we live in that, we have no fear. There's nothing that gets in our way. There's nothing that can total us, because you are everything to us, and you give through you everything to us, access to everything, God. We thank you. We lay everything at our feet. We lay our Plexus business down. We lay our families down. We lay our goals and our objectives and our wishes and our dreams, our dissociation and our indulgences. We lay them all at your feet, and we say, do with them what you will. All of it is yours. Take our hot messes and bring glory to you. We thank you. I thank you for joining tonight, and I don't know if we will have a meetup on Monday, just because we are going to my parents for the weekend, and that will mean I don't have the planning time that I typically would as we celebrate Easter together. So most likely next Monday will be off, unless Plexus does some like earth-shattering thing that we need to discuss. But otherwise, do life and do it well and do it loved. Bye, guys. Have a great, great evening. And hopefully I can get this to stop.